Hi, welcome to Creativity Inside and Out. I'm Cindy Joe, as you know, the host of the show. On the last show, we had Candy Buck, and wasn't that fun? She made me into that creature. I love when she does makeup on me, which I mentioned on the show. I thought, I'm going to use this a bit. So I went to Starbucks when I left the taping that day, and I wore the makeup, and the cashier, it was so funny because people would look at me and then they'd look away. Like they didn't want to stare, they'd just look away. But the cashier actually asked me why I was wearing the makeup, and it turns out he does paintings, and maybe he might be a guest on the show. And then I went to Jack in the Box, I'll admit it, and I drove through for some tacos, not to give them a plug or Starbucks, but and the woman at the drive-thru says, "Wow, love your makeup." So I was thinking, where else could I go? But I went home after that. So anyway, it was fun having Candy on the show, and on this show we have my friend Dave Lucarelli. Dave is a playwright. He writes comics. He's writing audio dramas. He is a musician, and he works in the film industry. We'll find out about all those things on this show. So stay with us. So here we are. We're with Dave Lucarelli, and welcome to the show.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you too. And let's talk about the first thing we talk about on every show is how we first met.
Okay. Well, we met at Magnolia Studios sometime during the 1990s.
It was. And that was in Burbank, California.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a studio that was run by a man named Bruce Nazarian, who is no longer with us, but
yeah.
He was kind of like, what's the Dickensian character that takes in all of the lost children?
Oh,
Fagin.
Totally, you're right.
Yeah.
He was like that.
Yeah, lots of long-haired misfits and rockers and people that were looking to get their foot in the door in the entertainment industry, and he gave us a shot. So we all got a lot of good experience there for sure.
We did. It was where I started, there and one other place. And this was working in the film industry, doing sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the film. And you worked in transfer, was it?
Yeah, primarily I was kind of a one-man transfer department, and then I would go in to the studios at night and I would record stuff for my band, and then I started towards the end. I was doing a little bit of work as a recordist for ADR. So.
Right, and we had little rooms side by side.
Yeah.
When I was doing when I was loading Dialog, we had those little rooms side by side. So yeah, we spent a lot of time there.
We did.
It was fun. I liked it there.
Yeah, a good bunch of people.
It was.
I think it says something that all these years later we still do a biannual reunion.
We do, and we have a good turnout for that too.
Yeah.
We usually have a good dozen people or so.
Yeah.
At least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. So, and you do all kinds of things. You do film. You're a musician. You write.
Yeah. I'm a writer, award-winning playwright. I've had 5 graphic novels published by various publishers, and some short stories, and edited horror anthology of prose. So yeah, I get around.
Right, and comics.
And comics, yeah. Individual issues and short comic stories, as well as the 5 graphic novels. And then most recently I just wrote my first audio drama too. So.
Oh, nice. Is that what graphic novels are? Comics? Is it
essentially a graphic novel is just a collected, longer comic book. It's just a fancy name. Some people, prefer it. Others find it pretentious, but.
So when I said comics, you'd already said you did comics, but I didn't know. Yeah, because it's not a genre that I'm in touch with. Yeah.
A medium, yeah, right.
A medium, yeah. So we got a medium. We got all these things. Let's talk about. We'll go into more detail about all those.
Sure.
Things. But let's talk about your childhood and where you grew up.
Okay. Yeah, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was a good town to grow up in. It was kind of 1/3 working class, blue collar, steel town, 1/3 college town, and then 1/3 cutting edge technology and financial center. So, it was considered while I was growing up there to be one of the friendliest cities, one of the most livable cities, but it was also a city that had its fair share of violence and racism and homophobia. So, I do miss certain aspects of it, but then there's other aspects of it that I was glad to get away from.
Yeah, when did you leave there?
I left after high school, 89. I went to USC. I had a couple scholarships. I wanted to go into the cinema school, which I didn't get into. And what I really wanted to do was to become a rock star. And they didn't offer that as a major, so I got the next best thing, which was recording arts, which was half technical sound engineering classes and then half music classes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And brothers, sisters?
Yeah, sort of. I have, my parents separated and divorced when I was relatively young, kindergarten, first grade, and my dad later remarried, so I inherited a stepbrother and a stepsister.
Okay. All right. Where do they live now? Are they out here in Los Angeles?
No, my stepsister is teaching in Clinton, South Carolina. She teaches art history in college.
Oh.
And then my brother is living in, I believe, Portland, Oregon right now, but we're not really in close touch.
Okay. So what did you do then after you graduated from USC?
Yeah, so I graduated USC and I worked for a couple of years as a runner at Signet Sound for $5-6 an hour. But the good thing was you could use the studio to record demos and even make records. And so I was always taking advantage of that. And then after a couple of years of that, the guy that had the space in the basement, Bruce Nazarian, he decided to leave there, and at first he went to the West Side with Gnome Productions.
Which was perfect.
Yes, because he was kind of a gnome-sized guy.
He was tiny.
Yeah. But he was also an interesting fellow. He was originally from Detroit. He was the replacement guitarist in Brownsville Station, who you might know from Smoking in the Boys' Room and that kind of stuff. And he was a good guy. He was a tough, no-nonsense guy who really, he did not have any patience if he was trying to explain something to you. He was a very bright man, and if you did not immediately pick up what he was saying, he had a tendency to just immediately lose it. But once you knew that about him, you could kind of adjust for that.
Right.
And then he bought the studio that we met at, which was Magnolia Studios in Burbank,
California.
Yeah, and that had a good run for a while it lasted.
I was there a good 2 or 3 years, I think.
Yeah, and then as that started to implode, I left there and became the recordist on the feature ADR stage at 20th Century Fox. So
nice.
I worked with Charlene Richard Steves, who has been an ADR mixer since Empire Strikes Back, and she trained a lot of the other top ADR mixers in town. So that was really an honor and a privilege to be able to work with her under her wing. And we worked together for more than 20 years on all kinds of movies, everything from The Simpsons to Fight Club and The Greatest Showman and Star Wars The Force Awakens and to some of the Marvel movies and
wow,
X-Files and all kinds of TV shows and movies that the best of which I think are considered classics.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, what exactly is ADR?
Right. So ADR, automated dialogue replacement, is basically in post-production. There are various reasons why one might need to change or re-record or redo lines of dialogue. Sometimes it's just a matter of the sound quality isn't very good. They filmed something that takes place in the Middle Ages, and they've got airplane noises overhead that they can't get rid of, or they filmed a love scene in front of a fountain or on the beach, and they can't get rid of that stuff. Or they may have decided that they want to change an actor's performance and make slight adjustments that way. Or they may have done a test preview screening, and the audience may have been confused about a plot point, so they want to rewrite some dialogue to make it a little bit more obvious or clear. Sometimes it's a matter of recording voiceover if there's narration in the film. And then the other thing that we do is group ADR, which is, when you have a bunch of group actors in the background, they're not actually talking, they're just mouthing as if they were talking, because you want to be able to record the upfront actor's dialogue as clearly as possible. So those voices need to be filled in as close to scenes.
And that would
as
be
you
in
can get.
scenes like what, for example?
Like a crowded restaurant, sitting with a bunch of people, tables around there where people are talking around them, that kind of thing.
Right. There was one movie I worked on, you were talking about, noises.
Yeah.
And I was editing dialogue on it. And it took place during the Civil War, the United States Civil War time period.
Yeah.
And a jet went over. It was an exterior shot, and a jet went over. It was like there were these men sitting outside playing chess, and this jet goes over, but there was no. It was a film. It was Jada Pinkett Smith.
Oh, okay.
It was her project, but it was a small thing she was doing, and there was no budget for ADR.
Yeah.
So we created wind, because the trees were moving. So we kind of created wind to match the frequency range of the jet.
Okay, kind of try to camouflage it.
We did, and it worked. It wasn't ideal, but it did work.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of stuff, all kinds of things like that.
Sure.
That you're repairing or enhancing or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And I think, the 20 years of sitting there listening to some of Hollywood's top actors and directors and writers and producers try to hone to find the exact right words to say, the right inflections, has kind of trained my ear as a writer too, to be able to understand what makes good dialogue.
Because that's an art in and of itself, isn't it? Writing dialogue. I mean, you can write a story,
right?
But to have actually people speak.
Yes, exactly.
And have it be entertaining or,
Right. And I'm a big believer in, I think it was Mark Twain who said the difference between the right word and almost the right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug.
Oh, I like that a lot. Can I borrow that?
Yeah, feel free.
Okay. Thanks. Is that the direction you thought you would go when you were going to USC?
Not necessarily, but on the other hand, in some ways, I mean, I was the first kid in my neighborhood to own a 4-track, and I used it so much that I broke the buttons on it, so I had to buy like another one.
Did you really?
Oh yeah.
That was on audio tape.
Yes, yeah, that was where you had 4 tracks, and after that you had to ping pong those tracks to other tracks to keep recording. Before there were VCRs, I would tape programs off of the television with my portable recorder. So in some sense, I was always kind of doing that stuff, but yeah.
Right. And was there anyone along the way who actually made an impression on you? An actor or maybe a mixer? You were talking about,
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you work with a lot of actors, and most of them are competent at what they do, and they show up and they say the lines in a believable way. But there are definitely some actors that stand out. I think Gary Oldman is one of those guys that when you work with him, the hairs on the back of your head stand up. And definitely Anthony Hopkins.
Because they're just so good.
They're just so good. And, the example I always like to give is Al Pacino, who's also an amazing actor. And he's the kind of guy that can read a line like a throwaway line, like keep the change. And he'll do 30 takes of it. And each take, the inflections are slightly different in between takes, but each one is perfectly usable, And then, he'll do 30 takes of that line, and then he'll turn to, the people in the studio and go, what do you think? You like that? You want some more? Is any of that good? And all of it was good, but, So, yeah, definitely a handful of actors. Brad Pitt, every time I've worked with him, it's been an extremely pleasant experience. Just a, very nice, down-to-earth, humble guy who couldn't be friendlier, couldn't be nicer, kind of like the cool older uncle or older brother that you always wish you had. He came in one time, we were doing we were doing commentary for Fight Club, and he made everybody margaritas.
Did he really?
Yeah, so that was nice. I mean, who does that, right?
That was kind of movie where you do something like that for it. Because it's kind of a way out, intense film,
Yeah, that's probably, out of all the movies I worked on, that was probably the one that probably my favorite, and probably one that they wouldn't make today, because from a certain perspective, it could be seen as glamorizing terrorists,
Yeah, that's true.
And then, in terms of directors, I'm a big fan of Bob Zemeckis. Whenever we've worked with him, and he's a big fan of Charlene, my mixer, and so he would always come to work with her for basically any of his films, and he's a guy that again knows exactly what he's doing, knows what he wants, doesn't do a million takes. Not afraid to delegate authority to the people that work under him, and is also open to suggestions and interested in what other people think.
Oh, nice.
So that's nice. Not all directors are so open-minded.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, what are some of his films?
Well, let's see. Probably the biggest one is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Forrest Gump, Back to the Future.
Just a few little films.
Yeah, and he's still making films. I worked with him most recently on a movie that's coming out with Tom Hanks called Here. I think I'm allowed to say that. Anyhow,
I think I saw something for that.
Yeah. So we just did a few lines, but he's still doing interesting, cutting edge stuff, and. Yeah, he's good.
An innovator, too, like
Definitely.
Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, and he did Polar Express. He's always kind of on the cutting edge of new technology.
And that's one of the things I loved when I worked in film, too, during our time period and later, is that you never know who you're going to meet.
Right.
And who you're going to work with.
That's true.
And so it's always every day is a fresh new day and full of exciting things, and
yeah,
that's how I found it anyway.
Yeah. Now, granted, doing ADR is kind of like going to the dentist for a lot of actors. They know that they have to do it, and it's probably ultimately good for them, but they're not necessarily looking forward to the process because it's hard. It is hard. Be in a very sterile environment and get yourself back to the exact place that you were when you were filming the actual scene.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of actors that actually relish it because they think they have a second shot at it, and so they can improve things. But getting back to that exact cadence and pitch and projection and it's kind of an art form in itself. Mm-hmm. There are people that are great actors that aren't necessarily that great at ADR, and then there are people that are very good at ADR that maybe are only average at acting. So
right, there was one movie I worked on. I won't say who it was, the actor who is actually a musician who was acting.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to do his ADR because he liked his original performance.
Okay.
But there were scenes like you were talking about water. There was a place where he was talking to his grandmother character by a waterfall, and you just couldn't hear the dialogue.
Yeah.
But I was editing the dialogue on it, so he intentionally did it out of sync, where the lips don't match what you hear. And I was taking syllables apart and time compressing and expanding and things to try to make this dialogue fit.
There are definitely some actors that if they're not happy, if they like their original performance and they feel what they're doing is not improving on it, that will give a less than optimal performance in the hopes that it's bad enough that the director will hear it and say, okay, we're going to lose that and go back to production.
Stick with the original.
So that can happen for sure.
Yeah. So it's not just recording, and it's dealing with people too.
It is. Yeah. I mean, half of it is the technical thing, and then half of it is being able to read the room and know when, if an actor is struggling and they don't know why something isn't matching, knowing when it's appropriate to speak up and say, hey, I think that needs a little more projection, or I think you were pitched up, or you were using your chest voice instead of your head voice in production, versus other times the director doesn't want to hear a peep from you, and anything that you say is just going to derail the session. So you have to have a feel for when to put your 2 cents in and when to keep your mouth shut, for sure.
Yeah, I want to start talking about stories because there's so many we could share.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, I'll say this: you're talking about musicians as actors. Charlene told me that the worst person that she ever worked with doing ADR was Bob Dylan, because he couldn't ever say a line the same way twice. Which, if you think about it, makes sense, because he probably never sings a song the same way twice.
Yeah.
Which, in some ways, is what makes him so great, but it doesn't lend itself to ADR.
Right. Should I say who the one was that
well, that's up to you.
messed up?
That's up to you.
Will he ever see the show? Will he see the show? It was John Mellencamp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I love him as a musician.
Oh, sure. He's terrific.
Yeah. But, and I can't remember if I liked his acting or not. I don't remember. But I do remember that I was angry at him. Because he made my job very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, So, now let's talk about your music.
Sure. Yeah, so when you met me, let's see. I had played in bands all throughout high school and college.
I was wondering, because we never talked about that before.
Yeah. So I started playing guitar and got together my first band, always original bands, when I was 14.
Oh, wow.
High school. And then I went on to play in a band in college, and another band after that with a couple of the guys, at least one of the guys that worked at Magnolia Studios. And then by the time you met me, I played in the band that was my longest lasting band that accomplished the most, a group called Dame Fortune. And we pretty much played throughout Hollywood and the Valley for about 10 years. We build ourselves as classic hard rock with a modern gothic edge. So if you took,
I think that's a good description. Yeah.
If you took Kiss and Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and put them in a blender, then you would, that was the kind of thing that we were going for.
I saw you one time at the Key Club.
Yeah, we played the Key Club.
Yeah. I think that's the only time I saw you live.
Okay.
I was there.
Well, over the course of those 10 years, we recorded and put out 3 albums and a DVD. And, we had a modicum of success. We got to the point where we could headline and draw a couple hundred people for a big show on a Friday or Saturday at the Viper Room, that kind of thing.
And you were the lead singer.
I was one of the 2 singers eventually, which that just sort of eventually happened by default, because we let our singer go, and then we needed somebody to sing, and we couldn't find anybody.
And you're a guitarist.
I'm primarily a guitarist, songwriter, lyricist. Yeah, I was the primary lyricist and songwriter for the band. but I wouldn't say, I pride myself on having a very realistic self-assessment of my capabilities. So, I think that I'm a great lyricist, a really above average songwriter, a good performer, and probably an average guitar player, and probably a below average singer. But,
You're a package.
Yeah. I mean, so...
when you pull all those, different talents together. Yeah.
We faked it good enough, and...
You were really entertaining, too. You were energetic.
Yeah.
You were committed to what you were doing on stage. Absolutely.
And we had a lot of fun. And people, I think that was... People can tell when you're doing something that you love and you're enjoying it, and they want to be a part of that. And so, we did that for about 10 years, and then unfortunately our drummer, John Merritt, died in a car accident.
Oh no.
Yeah. And that kind of took the wind out of our sails. And it was around that time too that I met my wife, Sherry Solomon, and we had a child together, my son Calvin, and suddenly everything that I had been trying to do with my life in terms of getting a record deal, going on tour, and all that kind of stuff seemed a whole lot less appealing because I wanted to be there to watch my son grow up. Mm-hmm. And so it was around 2008 that I started to switch gears and concentrate more on my writing. I still record and release songs from time to time under the name Dame Fortune. We're not really a fully functioning band, but especially during the pandemic, I had a lot of time on my hands. So I put out a few new songs and some new videos, and that was fun.
And you have a video that you're going to share with us.
Yeah. You can show them a little bit of the song "Rock and Roll Has Just Begun," which is a fun song, and that's actually Kevin Valentine on drums, who is a buddy of mine who's a musician who also went into post. He was one of the mixers on Better Call Saul, but he was the ghost drummer on the Kiss album Psycho Circus.
Really?
He's also worked with Cinderella. He's worked with Trent Reznor, pre-Nine Inch Nails. And he still goes out and plays. Right now, I think he's playing with Donnie Iris. I don't know if you remember him. He was kind of a regional guy.
What was that song? Amelia? Or
maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I want to say... I think one of his big songs was Love Is Like a Rock. I'm not
sure on that either.
Yeah, don't quote me. But anyhow...
We're guessing.
He does that, yeah. And he actually recently just started playing in a Cheap Trick tribute band, which is fun.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah. But,
I love Cheap Trick.
Oh, they're great. They're great. And believe me, Kevin is one of those guys that is... such a great drummer that I'm sure he can do all that material justice.
Right. So let's watch the video. We can watch the whole thing.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's watch it now.
Train
I love that.
Oh, thank you.
You get so into character. It's awesome.
I had a lot of fun with that.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the videos we made during the pandemic, and so there wasn't much else to do, and I start to go stir crazy if I can't do some kind of creative thing.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you're a big Kiss fan too.
I am a big Kiss fan.
A giant Kiss fan.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I know. I want to talk about that more, but we've got a bunch of other stuff we need to talk about.
We do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about. Do you want to talk about your plays next?
Sure. Yeah. So my dad was an English teacher, and he definitely took me to the live theater a lot as a kid. And so at a certain point, I wanted to get involved in writing live theater. And the first show that I wrote and produced was one called Dr. Zomba's Ghost Show of Terror, which we put on initially as part of the Fringe Fest. And it sold out and won a bunch of awards. So we put it on a second run for Halloween. We put that sold out. We put on.
Really?
Yeah, we put it on as part of Midsummer Scream, which is a Halloween horror convention, and
which takes place here in California.
In Long Beach usually.
And also Fringe Fest is what?
Oh, Fringe Fest is basically. These things happen all over the world. There's a huge one in Edinburgh, but in Hollywood, within the whatever it is, 3 to 6 mile square radius, they put on hundreds of plays all throughout the month of June. And hundreds, yeah. It's literally, you can go see 3, 4, 5 plays a day for like a month. And most of them are all new original productions. And it's a great community, the Hollywood Fringe Fest community, very supportive. Everybody goes to see each other's plays, and you know. So the Ghost Show.
I didn't see that one. Somehow I missed that one.
Yeah, so that came about because I was at Comicon one year, and I found this book called Ghost Masters, which talked about kind of a long-lost show that was very popular in the 40s and the 50s called The Spook Show. And it was simultaneously kind of the last vestige of what's the word I'm looking for? Vaudeville, and it was also kind of cutting edge immersive entertainment before that was even a word. What they would do is they would go and they would put on this touring show. They would 4-wall movie theater, and they would put on spooky kind of comedic magic. There was usually a seance. There may have been a kind of burlesque component to it. And then at the climax of the show, they would do what they called a blackout, where the audience would be completely enveloped in darkness, and they would see, hear, and feel supernatural monsters and ghosts all around them, and they had all kinds of tricks for making that happen.
This is so cool. Okay.
Yeah, it really, this was before there were haunted houses, before there were horror TV show hosts, but all that stuff kind of came out of the ghost shows.
Okay.
And there actually are some ghost show manuals that were printed at the time.
Really?
Oh yeah, they explained, because they became a franchise. And I thought to myself, wow, I would really love to see one of these ghost shows. But unfortunately, there are very few of them that are being put on. There are a few sporadically around the country from time to time.
Huh?
Yeah, people put them on as kind of revivals. And so I thought, well, the one way I could see it is if I write and put on my own. And so I did that. I hooked up with the director, Kevin Wetmore, who was the head of the theater department at Loyola Marymount University and
Los Angeles.
And also he's a horror writer and an all-around great guy. And one of the things that I found when we're trying to do a new creative venture is it's always good to surround yourself with people that have more experience at it than you do and know things that you might not know, because you can save yourself a lot of time and headaches taking advantage of their experience.
Yeah.
So that was great, and we're actually going to be putting on 2 more performances of the Ghost Show this Halloween in Paris, California, for the school district. So they're going to be free performances. But they are going to pay us some money, so that'll be good. And the show was very well received. There were a few people that hated it, but most people loved it. So
why would they hate it?
You know,
It was just too much for them?
No, I think one of the charming things about the Ghost shows is that they were kind of suitcase shows, right? Mm-hmm. That by and large, the average Ghost show was built up upon over-promising what it delivered. So there's a whole collector's market for these amazing spook show posters where it's like 1,000 monsters will descend upon you from the darkness. You know, the gates of hell themselves will rip open and drag you and your girlfriend to hell. You know, all this stuff. And so it was really kind of a theater of the mind. You know, and what they actually did was, you know, very often, a small pittance of what they promised they were going to do. Uh-huh. But that was part of their charm too. You know, I mean, it was played to very kind of rowdy teenagers that, and that kind of thing. And so what we did was actually very true to what the actual Ghost shows were. Some people were expecting David Copperfield or Penn and Teller and Chris Angel, and that's not really the point of a Ghost show. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other you wrote another play.
Yeah. So after I did that, I wrote a play called Crude, and in addition to being a hard rock guy, I'm also a hard rock fan. So actually, a couple of musician friends and I, we do a podcast called Rock Album Analysts. And we're lifelong friends and musicians and fans, and we take an in-depth look at a different rock album each time. And so we did the entire Kiss catalog. After that, we went on to do the entire Motley Crue catalog, because I'm a huge fan of that band as well. So the movie, The Dirt, and the book, The Dirt, had come out, and I enjoyed both of those pretty well. But I also was kind of disturbed by the fact that I thought, well, in broad strokes, this is how people are going to remember this band. They're going to be remembered as a band that did a lot of drugs and had a lot of sex and got into a lot of trouble with the law. And that's all true as far as it goes, but as a fan of the band, I really felt like there was a lot of interesting stuff about them, about what made them special as songwriters and performers and musicians and personalities, that was just going to get left on the cutting room floor. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of bands did drugs and had sex and got in trouble with the law. That wasn't, what made them special.
It didn't define them.
Yeah, and I think, they were and continue to be a great band, not because they did those drugs, but in spite of it. And so there were specific things that, as a fan, that I saw at their shows and that I appreciated about their music, that I thought were going to get lost unless I presented them in a way to show people that might not know the fullness of what the band was about. Like one example, they did a song called "Fight for Your Rights," mm-hmm. which was during a fairly racially charged time in our country. Was a song that was talking about anti-racism and standing up to prejudice, and mentioning Martin Luther King and all of that they don't really get credit for. It's kind of swept under the rug and forgotten.
Right.
So I did that play, and
people remember Girls, Girls, Girls.
Right, they remember that because that was the single.
Yeah.
But actually, there was kind of a much more subversive undertone to a lot of what they did that is largely forgotten, and. So that play had an interesting history because originally it was just going to be called The Crew. And apparently it somehow got to the attention of Nikki Sixx, the bass player from Motley Crue. And he was not happy that we were doing it. Now, granted, he didn't know anything about what the play was. I mean, this play, the point of the play was not to tear them down or make them look bad. Yeah. It was actually to show people an aspect of them that they might not be aware of. And, you know, it's interesting, the people that saw the play that didn't know a lot about the band were like, oh, you know, I had no idea that there was that side to them, and now I'm like interested to go listen to their music and check them out. But anyhow, we got a cease and desist letter from their lawyers, and it was a whole thing.
Did you already have it up and running at that point?
No, it was before the first shows. So that we consulted a bunch of music lawyers in town who were actually very happy to lend us their time for free, because apparently the band doesn't have a stellar reputation amongst music lawyers in Los Angeles, and they were very helpful.
That worked in your favor.
It did. They were very kind and helpful in telling us what we needed to change to make sure that if they sent somebody to check out the play, that we weren't going to get shut down, we weren't going to get into trouble. So The Crew became Crude, and we were allowed to use first names, but we had to change the spelling, and we couldn't use anybody's last names.
So all this was very specific.
Very specific, yeah. But actually, ultimately, ironically, it ended up causing us to rewrite certain portions of the play and making it a stronger play. So it ultimately ended up helping us. And, you know, to a one, everybody that was a fan of the band that came to see the play told us that they enjoyed it and that they got a lot out of it. We, in fact, had people come to see the play that knew the band, you know, and to a one, when we said, like, hey, did we get this right? They all said, oh, yeah. You sure did. So, you know.
That was brave of you to even ask it.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, if anything, the play itself in some ways is romanticized, but it's true. It's true in the sense of, I think, Motley Crue was a band that could have been that generation's Beatles. You know, I think they had the talent to transcend just being a great hard rock band to being one of the all-time greatest bands. And I don't think that they quite got there, but I don't think that that's unique. I think that for anybody that's in a creative enterprise, myself included, there's always that gap between what you aspire to and what you could potentially achieve and what you actually hit.
Yeah.
You know, and that was sort of one of the points of the play that I think we got across in kind of a poignant way. And it sold out, and we did an encore run, and that sold out. So, and there's a version of it that you can watch online, a pay-per-view, and that one has been the most watched pay-per-view of all the Fringe plays that were filmed. So, yeah, we were very happy with it.
Yeah. You know, I saw it and I really enjoyed it. What I loved was, in the beginning, your character development. Was so strong that as their worlds and their lives and as people started to change somewhat, you cared about them so much.
Yeah, well...
Does that make sense with what you were trying to...
Definitely. I think that they are very sympathetic and empathetic characters. You know, it's interesting. I we went on the Kiss cruise, my wife and I, and Doc McGee was there, and he kind of gave a little talk, and he was answering questions, and he's Kiss's former manager now that they're not around anymore, but he was also Motley Crue's manager before that. And so people asked him about what it was like to work with Motley Crue, and he said, the funny thing is, as crazy as it was working with those guys, with all of the drugs and the fights and the problems and the breaking of the law, he goes, they were actually really nice guys through most of the time I was working with them. He said, like, when the huge money came in, things changed. But up until that point, for all of the madness and craziness, he goes, I really, really liked those guys.
Yeah. That's nice to hear. A former friend of mine actually lived with Nikki Sixx during the time he got in the band.
Yeah.
And that's a whole story that I won't go into, but...
Well, you can tell me after we stop taping.
I will. That was right before I met her. Yeah.
Okay.
That they had broken up.
Yeah. Interesting.
And he moved out. But do you have any plans to bring back either? You said you were going to do the performances in Paris, California.
In Paris,
Ghost.
California, yep.
But either of the plays, do you have plans to bring them back beyond that?
Not at this time. I mean, we'll see. Who knows what the future holds. Maybe I'll write a third play.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I've always got ideas. It's just, there's so much to do and so little time.
This is true, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I do is I write comic books. So my
I wanted to ask you one other thing.
Oh, sure.
And then we'll go into that. You also directed.
Yes, I ended up directing. Well, I didn't direct the Ghost Show. I only wrote and produced it.
Okay.
But I did direct Crude. I wanted to get Kevin to do it, and he wasn't available. And it actually turned out great. I really had such a good time working with the cast, who were all really talented people.
Good.
Yeah. And shout out to Ryan Ruffing, who was the star, who played Nicky. Really channeled the role in an impressive way. Yeah. But everybody that I worked with was great, and I had such a good experience. They came up to me and they said, "Dave, we love working with you. We'd like to work with you again, and maybe you should do a movie and put us in it." And I said, okay, well, let me think about that. And so that's another thing somewhere down.
Week?
yeah, that's another thing somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
But haven't gotten there yet. But yeah.
Cool. Okay, now the comics.
Okay. Yeah, so I was a lifelong fan of the medium. Grew up reading comics, going to conventions, and. I didn't want to leave this earth without having made some comics. I think that's kind of what I use as the divining rod for what my next creative project should be. Is I look at the things that I like that I haven't seen necessarily, and I think, wow, I want to see that, so I guess I better make it and do it.
That's so cool too, because so much of what we see these days is remade.
That's true.
It's not original.
Sure, yeah. So the first comic I did was called The Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade. And that was inspired by a little bit of real-life history, something called the Gorbals Vampire Incident. So 1950s Scotland and the Southern Necropolis Cemetery, hundreds of school kids over several nights went looking for a vampire that they thought was 7 feet tall and had iron teeth and had killed a couple of local children. And they brought steak knives and sticks and dogs, all throughout the cemetery. Oh yeah. And it was blamed on comic books. At the time, it was considered mass hysteria. So I thought to myself, well, what if they found what they were looking for? And they formed the brigade. And what got me thinking about it was the youngest child that was involved was only 4 years old. And I thought, what would cause a 4-year-old to go into a cemetery at night with a steak knife looking to kill this vampire? And I thought, maybe he's got a baby sister. that he wants to protect from this vampire. And then in our book, a half century later, there's a couple of teenage delinquents in modern times that are drinking in that cemetery on the night the vampires come back. So they unwittingly end up becoming the newest members of the brigade. Okay, so there were 3 volumes in the set. Originally, I had an artist named Christopher Madison. He kind of fell off the face of the earth, unfortunately. So I found Henry Ponciano. And we've been working together. He's a Filipino artist, incredibly talented. And we've been working together for about the past 12 years now.
That's a while.
Yeah. It's been one of the most fruitful creative relationships of my life, for sure.
And that one is ongoing? It's still happening?
Well, that one is finished.
Series?
That one, it's just 3 volumes. You can get the complete series on Etsy. But it was a pretty amazing experience. I got to go over to Glasgow as a guest of the Glasgow Comicon twice, and I got my own private tour of the cemetery, and we were able to see where the incident took place, and we were able to incorporate some of the things that we saw into later volumes. And they actually did an exhibit about the Southern Necropolis Cemetery at a local museum that used some of the artwork from my comics as part of the exhibit. Yeah, so it was really, I was a little bit worried about, here I am coming to Glasgow to tell Glaswegians about something that is part of their own history. Right. But as it turned out, they really couldn't have been kinder and embraced the book, and it was a sold-out show. And then when we went back again, we did even better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a great experience. And
your role is you write the stories, you write the dialogue,
mm-hmm.
and then the illustrations.
Right, they're by Henry.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So basically what it is
they're beautiful.
Yeah, he's a very, very talented artist. But the way we work, and the way I think most people work these days, is I give him a script that has a panel-by-panel breakdown, and it's
kind of like a storyboard, right, for a film?
Well, kind of like a movie script. I don't draw the panels.
Oh, okay.
Although, some people do that. They do little thumbnail sketches. But I just do a panel-by-panel breakdown that has the dialogue and the effects and any captions.
Okay.
And then it's always with the caveat, because he is the artist, that if you can think of a more interesting or better visual way to tell the story, right. I always want to allow him that freedom, because it's a collaborative thing, generally speaking, making comics. And the most exciting thing is when you get back the art from him, and you see, this thing that you had just done the bare bones sketch of brought to life.
Oh, wow.
And we've been working together for so many years now that we're pretty good at reading each other's minds, mm-hmm. and that kind of thing. And there was, in fact, in the 3rd volume, there's one example where we had seen these statues that are in Glasgow, that kind of surround the cemetery, that are vampire bats, but they have human faces, and they're in these buildings. Yeah. And I was going to make a note to Henry when, I said, but make these bats have human faces. Mm-hmm. And I forgot to give him the note, but he did it anyway. So I think there's some kind of connection there.
Right.
And then...
Was he there too?
No, we've never met. We've just been working.
Really?
Yeah, because he lives in the Philippines.
Oh.
He does have a brother that lives in Long Beach, so I've been trying to get him to come out for Wondercon or San Diego, because I'd love to meet him in person and spend some time with him that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have a trailer.
Yes.
That you did.
We do. There's trailers for all 3 volumes, but I think we'll show the trailer for the 3rd volume, because that's probably the most sophisticated.
Okay, let's watch that now.
All right, let's do it.
That's life, isn't it? You don't get what you want, and then you die. What if I could fix that?
can't be. We killed you. You're dead.
Yeah. Join me.
The vampires are a disease. They corrupt everything they touch, including us.
Come at me, lad. Let's see what you got. Overextend like that, and you're done.
We found these from Edinburgh to Paris. Identical markings. What does it say?
Janice is coming.
Who is Janice?
Their queen. What is he?
You say you know who we are. Do the math.
No, please. I'm begging you. You can't do this to me. Anything but...
Who's there?
It's settled then. The brigade will make its final stand in the southern necropolis on All Souls Day.
So by most sophisticated, what do you mean exactly?
Well, the more that you do them, I think, the more that you see the possibilities of. I mean, it's a very crude kind of animation that I do at times, but you know, they're very kind of simplistic motion comics in a sense.
Yeah.
And luckily, I have some very talented actor friends that do the voices. And
I was just going to ask about the voices, and there's some sound effects.
yeah, I did the sound design for them, you know, just like I did the sound design for the plays. And so, yeah, another, I guess another example of me doing a little light directing.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how light it is. It's a lot of work
Yeah, but
to
it
put something like that together.
keeps me off the streets, so.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And then the other comic.
So then the other comic is called Tinseltown, and that is a period crime drama about one of the first female police officers in Hollywood. And in real life, my mother was a police officer, so it's also,
Really?
oh yeah, in Pittsburgh.
Boy, she must have been tough.
She was tough, and it was tough for her to be a police officer then in the 80s and 90s, and so I thought to myself, well, it must have been even harder for some of the first female police officers. And I started doing some research, and I found, interestingly enough, that Universal Studios, around the time of the silent pictures, was kind of a proto-feminist organization in the sense that they had, they were kind of a semi-autonomous city, and they had a female mayor, police chief, female police officers. They did. Now, the officers themselves were not fully functioning. They were kind of a cross between lot security guards and people that were there to kind of amuse and assist the tourists. But they did solve real crimes and petty, you know, I mean, if somebody got their purse stolen, or, you know, if a child got separated from their parents on the tour, you know, they were there to help with things like that. And actually, in doing further research, I found out they weren't the only studio back then that had female police officers. D.W. Griffith's studio had that as well.
Really?
Yeah, because back then, those studios were such factories that they had hundreds of extras coming and going on the lot every day, and it wasn't unusual for a couple of them to pair off down some corridor or back alley and get up to some hanky-panky. So you needed some kind of schoolmarm type female police officer to go, hey, you two, cut that out. You know, we're trying to make movies here. So yeah. So I did two miniseries with Alterna Comics, Tinseltown, and then Tinseltown Losing the Light.
Okay.
And both of which have been collected in graphic novels now. Alterna put out the first Tinseltown. It's kind of a director's cut, so it's got more pages of story and some additional pinups. And then Tinseltown Losing the Light, I wanted to tell kind of a slightly different sort of story. I got to be really interested in some of the politics and some of the things that were going on in the United States just prior to the U.S. entering the First World War.
Oh, so way back, yeah.
Yeah, so I did some research and I found a really interesting book called Dark Invasion about the fact that there were actually a bunch of German terrorist attacks on the U.S., both in New York Harbor and also on the ships that were leaving New York Harbor, that were kind of covered up and hushed up by the U.S. government because the U.S. government knew that they would probably have to join the First World War, but they wanted to delay that as long as possible because the businessmen in the United States were selling, a lot of goods and services to theoretically both sides of the war, but basically to the Allies because those were the ones that they could actually get to. And from the Germans' perspective, there were German sailors that were caught when the war started in the port, and they had nothing else to do but sit around and stew and try to come up with ways to help the mother country. So some of them would plant bombs, on board the ships that were sending out supplies to their enemies. And I did a lot of research into that era and that period, and I thought, well, what if there were similar kinds of things going on the West Coast? And I don't want to give anything away, but I did find some supporting evidence that there could have been. So that's what Tinseltown Losing the Light is about.
Oh, okay, all right. And the first Tinseltown, that takes place in what time period?
1915.
Okay.
Yeah, and then 1916 is when the second one takes place, and there will be a third one eventually.
Nice.
I'm kind of looking for a new day job right now. If anybody out there needs any ADR work done, looking for an ADR mixer, I'm your guy.
He's the best.
Yeah, thank you. So once I get a little more money in my coffers, there will be a third Tinseltown called Tinseltown Lady Killer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And that one is going to be sort of dealing with the positive and negative aspects of fame and what we think of as fame, because right around 1917 is when the first foundations of what would become fame in the 20th and 21st centuries were being laid down, and the positive side obviously is that freedom that you have, that money can afford you, but then the downside is that, there's a number of downsides from the obsessive, dark nature of overzealous fans, towards the people that they worship and how they can turn on a dime. And then the other way that you could always get famous in this country was by killing someone, right? So you had gangsters being turned into quasi role models, and that's dicey territory at best. So Tinseltown Lady Killer is going to take a dive into all of that.
And you're making me think, and this is coming from someone who knows nothing about comics. I never read comics. It just never really crossed my path. But are most comics written about something that's true to life or based on that, like yours are, or are many of them just completely like Superman, for example, or superheroes, or do they incorporate into those kinds of things?
Well, obviously in the United States, probably the dominant genres of Marvel and DC are the superhero genre. But there's all kinds of independent comics and manga and that run the full gamut of everything from very personalized autobiographical stories, stories like mine that are inspired by a germ of actual history and then extrapolated upon. And I think even the superhero comics, to a certain extent, can't help but be a reflection of the time that they were produced in.
Right.
It's interesting. I was actually having a conversation with a guy. There's a thing called Comic Book Sundays, which is an informal get-together that some people in the comic book industry and entertainment industry that are fans of comic books get together and have. And I was at one of those yesterday, and they were talking about the idea that Superman has extra kind of resonance when it comes to immigrants, because he is, in a sense, the ultimate immigrant, right? He comes from not just a different country, but a different planet, and and that's kind of an aspect of him that is often overlooked and forgotten, but was certainly a part of some of the early stories.
Do you know what year he was created?
I want to say it was 1939. I think Action Comics came out. It's interesting because the two people that created him, one of them, his father was killed in a bank robbery. And so Superman is kind of the ultimate fantasy of a father figure. If only my father had been so all-powerful enough that those bullets couldn't hurt him.
Protector.
Yeah. And also so many of these early comics were done by Jewish immigrants, like the creators of Superman, like Jack Kirby, who is essentially the king of comics and one of my personal heroes. There's a great book, if you're interested in that, called Men of Tomorrow, that details the early history of the comic book industry. And, because there was such prejudice against Jewish people at the time that, it was really only the pulp magazines and the comics, because they were so low rent and kind of intertwined with organized crime, they were willing to look past the fact that these people were Jewish and hire them to be writers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And before we get too far away from it, you also have a trailer for Tinseltown.
I do, yes. This is actually the trailer for the second graphic novel, Tinseltown, Losing the Light.
Tinseltown, Losing the Light.
1916, Hollywood. Officer Abigail Moore is back on the lot.
And action!
Look out! Hey, you! Stop!
I'd say you got a mole in Utopia.
What can I say? I believe in living a life without limits.
I had a friend who believed in the same thing.
Yeah? How'd that work out?
It didn't.
The flickers corrupt our youth! The flickers corrupt our youth! The flickers corrupt our
All
youth!
right, that's enough.
Extra, extra war in Europe!
She's some.
Trust no one. Keep an eye out for anything suspicious. And watch your back.
I killed my wife. I watched the light go out of her eyes. Just think what I'm going to do to you.
So, depending upon when you're watching this, you can either order Tinseltown Losing the Light from the Backer Kit pre-order, or there is going to be launched a Indiegogo second chance for a couple of weeks where you can order it through that. So one or two of those links will be active on the page if you want to check it out.
Okay, and we'll put all those pages also on the Creativity Inside and Out website as well, so you can find it there.
Yeah.
All right. And the audio dramas.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I've gotten into most recently. I grew up, my dad shared his love of the old-time radio shows with me, everything from Lights Out to The Shadow and The Green Hornet. And I grew up listening to Power Records. They would put out these audio dramas that had like Star Trek and superheroes and all kinds of stuff that you could get on records. And then more recently, I was listening to some of the old-time radio shows on Sirius XM. They play some of them, some of the hard-boiled detective stuff.
Have to find those.
Yeah, yours truly, Johnny Dollar, Insurance Investigator. It's fun stuff.
Oh, it's great stuff with the commercials.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ovaltine. That was a big sponsor of a lot of these shows. But so as I've been looking for a way to work and side hustles, I discovered that there is this kind of burgeoning market in audio dramas in India and China, and for whatever reason, they like kind of Americanized English melodramatic style audio dramas, and
so not audiobooks, but audio.
No, not audiobooks. These are, I mean, to some extent, there's a little bit of crossover and overlap, because some of them may just be read by one person, but they have sound effects and they have music and things like that. Or some of them are like listening to the oral equivalent of a play, where you have different characters playing each role. Different companies do it differently, but there's a company called Headphone, and they asked me to write one for them. So I came up with this kind of romantic thriller, melodrama, if you will, called Femme Fatale.
Okay.
And it's inspired in part by some real life occurrences back in my women loving days, when I was playing in a band, and I knew you, because it's about a guy named Dale who is trying to get over the fact that his fiance broke up with him and broke his heart, and he meets this dancer in a bikini bar named Erica, who seems to be too good to be true. And he finds her to be as addictive as any drug, and if he's lucky, he may get out of the relationship alive.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. So
she's a vixen.
Yeah, she's a classic femme fatale, hence the title. And it was based on kind of an amalgamation of several different women that I dated and knew. But, back when you're playing in a hard rock band in Hollywood and whatnot, I mean, the kinds of women that you meet, in hindsight, I wouldn't necessarily trust to watch my cat, but they all seemed like great ideas at the time.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And what are you doing with this? You're developing it. You said you're writing it.
So depending on when this comes out, the first episode should be out. I've written all 5 episodes, but the way it works is you get to go to the Headphone app, look for Femme Fatale, listen to it for free, the first episode. If you like it, subscribe, and then you can listen to the other episodes as they're made, and you can listen to all the other shows that are on the app as well. So,
who does the production?
Well, it's an interesting process. They let you choose the voice actors from a roster that they provide you with, and they give you samples, and then they have them do the performances, and then you can give them some notes of adjustment and redo things to a certain extent, and they have an editor. And as we speak right now, there's literally one edit I have to get him to make before I can approve the episode and they put it up. So fingers crossed, Headphone allows me the one final fix
that
I would like done, and we can get the episode up.
Did they sweeten them too, or?
Well, they have,
which means adding music, sound effects.
Yeah, they do. They do. They have music and sound effects and footsteps and Foley and the whole shebang. It's actually it works surprisingly well. Of course, me being a a control freak and a director, I would love to be able to sit, in a meeting and direct the whole episode live and give real-time notes and adjustments. That's not the way that they work, unfortunately. But, for what they do, I think it comes out very well.
Do you know where they're based out of?
Headphones in India.
Oh, that wouldn't be convenient.
No.
I love it. Well, I hope that goes really well for you. I hope that turns into something.
Yeah, me too.
Ongoing and enjoyable and all of the above,
Yeah, I'd like to keep writing more of them. It's been a cool experience.
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? We could talk for days.
We could. No, I think that pretty much covers it. Well, the one thing we haven't mentioned is that I'm doing one of my favorite cons coming up later this week called Wondercon. And for those of you who've never been, I would highly recommend it. It's put on by the same people that do San Diego Comicon, but instead of being impossible to get a ticket in a hotel room, you can actually go to it, and it's only 40 to 60,000 people. It's not like 120,000 people. So that means that things like crossing the street or getting a bite to eat are not major logistical hurdles. You can actually get into the panels. Now, if you're only interested in Comic-Con is going to see movie stars or TV stars, there is a lighter presence of them at Wondercon than you'll find at San Diego. But there are panels for TV shows and movies and all kinds of stuff. And one of the fun things about Wondercon that they've done in the last couple of years is something called the floor tour. So if you go to a table, you can get a flyer and you can go to all the different tables of the participants. There's about 50 of them. And in a nice, casual, low-pressure way, you get to meet 50 or so indie comics creators. They'll tell you all about their books. They'll give you a little free piece of swag. And if you get them all checked off, you enter to win prizes at the end of the day. So it's a fun time, and it's a great way to find some really cool people and some really cool comics.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. And creativity inside and out, being me. I'm going to go out there and Dave, instead of doing a performance here on the show or a demonstration here on the show, we're going to make Wondercon his booth.
Right.
Our performance or demonstration.
So you're going to hear a lot of me saying the exact same pitches I told you about my comics.
This is true.
But
you'll get to see
you'll get to see it in action. That's right.
It'll be live and in person, and it'll be, well, it won't be live, it'll be taped, but it'll be us at this event with the energy and everything that's going on as well. Yeah, definitely. I'm a huge fan of WonderCon. Even if I wasn't exhibiting there, I'd tell people to go because it's a positive vibe and really a celebration of creativity. Oh, nice. Yeah, and I've never been before. Yeah. So I'm excited to go out. And so we will wrap up here on the interview portion of the show, and we will see you at WonderCon. See you there. Hi, it's me, Cindy Jo, and I'm here with Dave Lucarelli at Wondercon in Anaheim, California. And a change of plans today. Aaron Buck was going to shoot this today, but he injured his hand very badly, and we hope that he heals very quickly and feels better soon. So I'm on my own with Dave, so we're going to improvise with shooting this today, and let's spend some time with Dave. We're going to hand the camera off now.
Hi, Cindy Jo. Thanks so much for joining me here at WonderCon. Hey, it's thrilling. I love it here, Dave. Thanks. So WonderCon, for those of you who don't know, is kind of the little sister convention of Comicon. It's put on by the same people that do Comicon, but instead of being like 120,000 people, this is a mere 40 to 60,000 people. So, is that all? Yeah, crossing the street is not a major logistical hurdle. You can actually get a ticket, you can get a hotel room, and it maybe doesn't have quite the same star power in terms of TV stars and movie stars, but that's okay because I work with those guys in my day job, and it's always been a really supportive con since I started doing this con 12 years ago. It was my first con. I had the one issue of Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade, and now we have 3 collected volumes and the complete set right here of the entire story. and some additional unreleased art as well. So,
What do you mean unreleased art?
well, for instance, this was the original cover when I had a different artist of the first issue, and then these are some cover variants that we did. This is like photo cover of my son Calvin posing as Percy there. You can see how that's sort of a recreation. And these are the color covers of some of the...
Hold it up a little bit more. There we go,
Sure.
because we're getting a glare.
Okay, yeah. These are the color covers of some of the individual issues. So I didn't want any of that stuff to be lost. This is some of Henry's rough sketch art for various things. Again, here's a page that we did that didn't end up in the actual comic book. It kind of, think of it as a deleted scene.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And things like that. Then there's a little story here called The Legend of the White Lady. The same cemetery that the Gorbals vampire incident happened in.
You talked about in the interview portion.
I did. This is the story that we got out of it when I said that we got a story. Yeah. So we've got that, and a little beer label for an imaginary beer. 10 Men beer, hand brewed, strong enough for 10 men in Glasgow, Scotland.
That's awesome. Have you tried it?
Well, it's imaginary. Yeah. But the beer of choice for Scottish vampire hunters everywhere.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another shot of my son cosplaying as Percy from the Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade.
And he's older now.
He is. Normally, my wife and my son are here and they kind of help out. Unfortunately, he's at an AAU basketball tournament in Las Vegas. So they're having fun playing lots of basketball, and I'm here by my lonesome trying to make this all happen.
In
Anaheim, yeah. And it's a rainy Saturday, so we're hoping that the rain brings everybody inside to come, get warmed by some nice comic books.
Yeah. What else do you have here? There's another side over here.
Yeah. So here's both volumes of Tinseltown.
Okay.
Tinseltown Volume 1 and Tinseltown Losing the Light. These are the director's cuts, so they have some additional pages of comics content, some pin-ups by various artists, and this actually has an introduction by Tony Isabella, who was the creator of Black Lightning. I grew up reading the column that he wrote for the Comic Buyer's Guide, and it turns out he was a fan of Tinseltown. He was kind enough to write the introduction to the book, and he's actually at the convention. So at some point I'm going to go over to his booth and give him a signed copy of this and thank him for writing that. Now these are some of the single issues. A couple of them were sold out of, but the interesting thing about these are published by Alterna Comics, which is run by Peter Samedi, based out of New Hampshire, and these are printed on newsprint like comic books used to be, right?
How cool is that?
Yeah, so if for those of you who remember that and are nostalgic for that, you can buy these issues.
Even the paper is like newsprint?
Exactly, the paper is newsprint, and there is something to be said for it, right? It's a little less bright, a little less garish.
Right.
This is something that we did as part of one of the Kickstarters. This is a pin set. So you've got the Tinseltown logo, you've got Abby's face, and then you've got the Utopia Studios badge, and the number of the badge was my mother, Miriam Lucarelli's police badge number.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the cool things that we do, I'm part of a nice group of fellow creators, we do this thing called the floor tour. The way this works is you come to Wondercon or Comicon or any of the major cons, and you pick one of these up, you go to all these booths, you'll get a free piece of swag, you get to meet all these nice creators and they'll show you their stuff, nice low pressure situation. And if you get all of the free swag at all these booths, you turn this in and you can get, you're eligible to win free prizes at the end of each day.
That always works, right?
It does,
That's really cool.
Yeah. So this is some more Tinseltown stuff. Here's some pin-ups that we did. This is the back cover of Tinseltown Volume 1.
Those would be great.
Yeah, this is...
If you frame them? these?
You can frame these, absolutely. This is one that was done by an artist named Ryan Wynn, who also had a book out through Alterna, and he was
your mom, right?
that. Well, you know, it's not a one-to-one correspondence, but definitely, you know, the book is my tribute to her. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
This was this is fun. This is a little Judge Dredd mashup that we did, you know, and if you look for the details here. See, Utopia VR Production Facilities, a WD Corp subsidiary, which, so that's the Fox lot there, right after it got bought by Disney. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The first season's about 45 minutes.
So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And this is the newest thing that I was talking to you about. It just came out, and you know, there's some noir elements in Tinseltown, but this is real, true, modern, dark noir about love gone wrong, kind of semi-autobiographical in terms of, it's about an amalgamation of various women that I may have dated here and there over the years, and story that would be too unbelievable to be in an autobiography, so I made it a radio drama.
Right. Nice.
Yeah. And we just have a lot of miscellaneous things here. This is a book published by a friend of mine, Kevin Glover, who was on the panel yesterday, actually, and he asked me to write a story for it, so I wrote a fun little horror tale called Where Waldo, which is a mash-up between a werewolf story and Where's Waldo. So
that's really clever. I like that. I like the shirt too. The Waldo shirt.
This is a little this is a custom thing my son and I did just for laughs. It's yeah, maybe we're still in the hole. For any of you who saw the final episode of Rick and Morty, they're so jaded that they go into the fear hole, you know, to like try to find some thrills where you're supposed to confront your worst fears. And the problem is once you go in the fear hole, you can never tell if you're back out. So like they start like living their life, you know, and then like weird stuff keeps happening to them again, and they're like, okay, maybe we're still in the hole. So it's kind of a nice parable for today's modern times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So then this, Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. This was another anthology that I was in. The really nice books that are put out from Russell Nolte's.
I'm sorry,
this is an anthology of by short story, comic stories of all the different Cthulhu gods. We've got a story in here called so written by H.P. Lovecraft. He has a kind of pantheon of gods, if you will.
Okay.
You know, he was a famous horror writer. Our story here is The Old Gods Ain't What They Used to Be.
Sounds like a song to me.
It could be. It could be. And there's a lot of great stuff in here. One of the cool things that Russell does, aside from the high production value of this book, is he puts these signing pages at the front of all these. So, you know, a lot of the artists and the writers are at these conventions. You can go and you can get them to sign for their individual stories.
What a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. So that's that.
Okay.
And then the only other thing I'll show you real quick.
Yeah.
This is Winter Horror Days. This is a horror anthology that I had the pleasure to edit, and for a hot New York minute, it was the #1 horror anthology on Amazon.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. That's huge.
Yeah, it has a story in it by Lisa Morton, who was the former president of the Horror Writers Association, David Gerald, who wrote Star Trek: The Trouble with Tribbles, and invented the Slee Stack from Land of the Lost.
Okay.
So, and that's pretty much what we got.
I love it. I love it. All right, so I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Why do you come to Wondercon and have a booth? And what do you hope to accomplish by doing that?
Well, the great thing about WonderCon is I get to see friends that I've known for years and fans that keep coming back, and every year they say to me, hey, what do you got for me this year? And that's a good feeling, and I get to meet new people and make new friends, and you know, hopefully put some of my creative works into their hands and spread the word about the kinds of stuff that I'm doing, and it's a great feeling when the new people that you meet start coming back, year after year, and they want to see what else you got for them, and that's really what it's all about.
Nice. Have you ever met anyone here that you collaborated with on anything?
Yeah, it's a small world, really. We did a panel yesterday called Writing for Indie Comics, and I'd met all the panelists over the years at various comics-related things like Free Comic Book Day or comic book conventions, and some of the panelists were figuring out, actually we know each other too, because we met, the whole indie comics community there's probably not more than 1 degree of separation, so if I don't know you directly, chances are I probably know somebody that knows you.
Right. So this is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing all your stuff with us.
My pleasure, and this is just a fraction of what you will see at Wondercon. So I hope you stick around, and I hope you get to experience the whole con, because it's one of my favorite cons, and I want to let as many people as possible know about it.
Terrific. Thanks, Dave.
You're quite welcome.
So here we are. Dave and we have been to Wondercon, to his booth, and it was fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, and thanks for getting me out there. I'd never been there before, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
It was great to be there. So thank you again for being a guest on the show and sharing everything that you do with us.
My pleasure.
It's great. It's great. So where can people find what you do?
Well, if any of the stuff that you saw little previews of in this episode intrigues you, just go to the links at the bottom of this YouTube and check it out.
Yeah, and it'll be on the website, creativityinsideandout.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see what we have next time. Thank you for watching and or listening to Creativity Inside and Out. I do recommend watching my show if you can, because it's really tailored toward being a visual show. It's available on YouTube. Just search for Creativity Inside and Out and look for the light bulb logo. If you do listen to the show, go to https://creativity-inside-and.captivate.fm/listen. There you will find a variety of places where you can listen, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Enjoy watching and or listening. And please, if you would, follow the show and subscribe. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.